What is up, everybody out there in podcast land? It is time for Sports Frenzy 2.0. The Maestro flying solo this week. The Conquistador stuck out of the state on business, so you are stuck with me. But that's okay. Things change up a little bit when I'm doing the show solo. Some things better, some things worse. Of course, the dynamic between Dave and I is not there, but I get to be a little more loud and boisterous, and I get to give you a little bit more of that color commentary that you usually get from Dave. So let us start off here on April the 3rd, 2024. Of course, this will drop tomorrow morning, Thursday, April the 4th, our 13th episode of 2024. And of course, college basketball, whether it's the men, whether it's the women, is stealing all the headlines. Yes, even taking headlines away from opening week in baseball. Let's start off with the women. And unfortunately, this won't be the last we talk about women's basketball. So, that means a little bit of foreshadowing in that something could be coming up at the end of this episode, and we all know what that means. But let's sing our praises right now for women's college basketball, as everybody else is doing right now. And rightfully so. The ratings have been phenomenal. We've got Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, South Carolina. Interest, at least in my lifetime, and that's quite a few years, has never, ever been higher for women's basketball. And that's a great thing. Yes, we mock. Yes, we ridicule. That's what we do here on America's top politically incorrect sports podcast. But when praise is warranted, we will dish out praise as well. So we're down to the Final Four on both the men's and the women's side here. In the women, we've got at least one really good matchup, which will probably lead to a great championship game. On the one side, we have Caitlin Clark and Iowa versus the behemoth of women's college basketball over the long term. Not recently, but over the last few decades. Of course, I am talking about UConn. UConn, of course, also dominating right now on the men's side, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now, on the other side of the bracket, national semifinal for the women, South Carolina takes on North Carolina State. Another very interesting story, which we will embellish. Not with falsehoods, just with more facts in a few minutes. So that inevitably, if you're going to make that jump, and we love the upstarts, we love the upsets, the Cinderella stories, but if you assume, and of course, we don't want to do that, because you know what happens, you make an ass out of you and me. But if we assume South Carolina wins, stays undefeated, then they will face either UConn or Caitlin Clark in Iowa in the championship game on the women's side. That, my friends, will probably break the all-time record for ratings for a women's basketball game. Now, of course, we just had the record set. Iowa beat LSU to get to the Final Four, the Elite Eight matchup between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and Kim Mulkey. Ooh, lots of storylines going on there. But the ratings are in. 12.3 million viewers on ESPN on average for that game. That is an all-time women's hoops record. Now, of course, you've got Caitlin Clark on the one hand with Iowa, arguably the greatest female basketball player of all time. That will upset a lot of people, and I don't give a rat's ass. Tell me she's not. Prove to me she's not. If you want to say, well, she could blow out her knee tomorrow, okay. You want to go down that extreme road, fine. But I'm telling you, I don't think we've ever seen anything like Caitlin Clark. And of course, on the other side in that game, you had LSU, the most unlikable, disgusting, despicable team on the face of the earth, at least when it comes to women's basketball. Of course, Kim Mulkey trying to steal all the headlines back on her. I guess she thought she was taking the heat off her team, getting all paranoid about these quote unquote hit pieces coming out from various media sources about her and her team and how she handles her team, and much ado about nothing, and a big distraction that I think ended up hurting her team in the long run. But of course, that wasn't the only thing going on with America's most despicable women's basketball team. They, of course, somehow we forgot to come out for the national anthem. And you know how much we love that. Note sarcasm here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. And then, of course, we have Angel Reese. And I hear all the pinheads and the idiots out there in the major sports media defending Angel Reese. I will not defend Angel Reese. Angel Reese is a nut job, head case, selfish human being. And unfortunately, we have so many of them in professional sports right now and collegiate sports. It makes me sick to my goddamn stomach. Angel Reese had to make everything about her, just like her coach. She probably learned it from her coach. As Kim Mulkey tries to make everything about her when it comes to these, again, quote unquote, hit pieces in the media. Angel Reese, oh yeah, I had an injury, but I fought through it. See how tough I am. And she turns herself into a victim. Everybody said bad things about me, and everybody's denigrating me, and look at me, and she's crying. And stop making yourself out to be a victim. If I ran a WNBA team, and God help me, I never would want to, for many, many reasons. A lot of the reasons the same as I would not want to run an NBA team or a Major League Baseball team. I wouldn't want Angel Reese on my team at all. She's a cancer. Look at all the things just in the last year. She's mysteriously off the bench, off the lineup for LSU early in the year. Something happened. I don't know if it was between her and Mulkey. Something happened. She's a prima donna. Yeah, you can take your choice, coach or player. So LSU gets what they deserve. And hopefully Angel Reese will just fade away into oblivion in the WNBA, and that will be the last we ever hear of her and her "I'm a victim" act. And again, I'm not allowed to, I guess, say that Caitlin Clark handles everything with grace and class, because that makes me a racist, which is another reason why this country sucks balls, is because you can't actually praise Caitlin Clark without being called a racist. But again, more on the women's game coming up at the end of this particular episode. So let's move on to the men, shall we? I don't know if we're looking at good Final Four matchups or we're waiting and hoping to get the best possible title game matchup we can, but UConn, I mentioned the men, just like the women, dominant. Goes back and forth, it seems like. Every decade or so, it's the women and then it's the men. Right now, I think the men are a little more dominant, but still, both the men and the women for UConn in their respective basketball Final Fours. UConn obliterates Illinois, probably the toughest matchup they had to this point in the Elite Eight. They go on a 30-0 run. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's almost unheard of. And you guys know I've talked about it. I can't stand the head coach there either. I'm not just bashing Kim Mulkey. I don't just bash the women's coaches. You know, I hate Staley with South Carolina. I think she's a racist piece of garbage. But Hurley for UConn, he's an egomaniac. And again, I think this just runs in the blood. If you're going to make it to a certain point when it comes to coaching, especially in basketball, especially in collegiate basketball, you've got to be an asshat. How many honestly, likable, all-time great head coaches are there in the college ranks when it comes to basketball? Not many. Not many at all. You can run through Bobby Knight. You can run through Mike Krzyzewski, Pat Summitt, maybe Jim Valvano comes to mind. But am I rooting against UConn? No, not really. I wouldn't mind seeing that. It's not like UCLA that just won back to back to back to back, and it just got boring and it wasn't good for the sport. UConn going back to back on the men's side is not going to hurt anything. It'll give us a villain to root against next year. So they face off against Alabama in the Final Four. I mean, at this point, you got to give Alabama a puncher's chance. If they can get on fire from three-point land, who knows? But obviously, UConn a heavy, heavy favorite to advance to the title game. On the other side, we have Purdue. And of course, Purdue single-handedly busted my bracket. I know you're thinking, how does that happen? Because I don't pick chalk. I actually pick who I think is on fire, who's got a nice little win streak going. Maybe played well in their conference tournament. So I had Tennessee over Purdue in the Elite Eight, and it bit me in the ass. So now I have to root for, we're not going to call them Cinderella, but I have to root for NC State to beat Purdue and Zach Edey in the Final Four. Otherwise, I will finish in second in Sports Frenzy Madness, March Madness competition. Now, as far as that game is concerned, again, I give NC State a puncher's chance. They prove my point. It's my fault I took them in the first round, didn't take them further. I should have taken them further. I should have seen how well they played in the ACC championship, the ACC tournament, and seen that they had killer momentum. So, can they sustain it against Purdue? It's going to be tough. And I don't like Zach Edey for one reason and one reason only. It's not his fault. I don't think the officials know how to call a game with Zach Edey involved. As I watched the Tennessee game, it was almost no point, especially when it got to the second half. You can't breathe on the guy without them calling a foul. I saw a little span in the first half of that game, about 5-6 minutes, where Tennessee was actually allowed to body him up, play defense, double team him, and keep him in check. And that's when Tennessee briefly had a lead. So that's something I don't like about where this game could be headed, is that even though I think NC State's got the body in the middle to match up with Zach Edey, are they going to let them play? Or is Zach Edey just going to be able to move back and push somebody all the way to the basket so he can throw up a little lay-in? Are they actually going to make Zach Edey work for it and actually have to play basketball? And I can tell you right now, I can see why this guy is not high on NBA draft boards for next year, for the next draft. Is because I don't think this game that he plays, it's great for the college game. I don't think it translates at all to the professional game. And it wouldn't shock me a bit if he doesn't get drafted until midway into the first round, if not later. Because I don't think when he gets into playing with the big boys, he doesn't have the skills of a guy like Victor Wembanyama. He does not have those types of skills. He doesn't shoot three-pointers, and that's a critical factor in playing in the NBA. If you're a big guy, you got to do like Chet Holmgren, you got to do like Wembanyama. You got to at least be able to shoot the three-pointer. And Zach Edey, I have not seen it at all. He is Wilt Chamberlain. Unfortunately, that makes him an anachronism in today's game. That being said, I think we are headed for the inevitable showdown between arguably the two best teams throughout the entire 23-24 season. I think we're headed for UConn versus Purdue. I'm rooting for NC State, but I think Purdue wins, and I think we're going to get the UConn-Purdue showdown. We'll talk more about that if it happens next week. Of course, we'll do our big recap on it because the game obviously is coming up this Monday, the championship game. Saturday is the Final Four. So next week's Sports Frenzy 2.0 will recap all of that action as I try to figure out on Saturday night how to juggle the Final Four with the first night of WrestleMania. Interesting story from Division II. For the first time since 1984, Minnesota State won both the men's and the women's basketball tournaments. So Minnesota State, again, D2, not D1, D2. Minnesota State, kudos to them for winning both the men's and the women's championships in basketball. Again, first time since 1984 that has happened. And a lot of people do not like the NIT. Of course, it is now second fiddle. There was a time way back before I was born even, where the NIT was more important than the NCAA tournament. My, how times have changed. But the NIT matchup for the championship game coming up here is stellar. Two teams that really should have made it into the big dance. Two teams that I think could have done some serious damage in the NCAA tournament. So you're going to get a really good matchup in the NIT final. Worth watching. Rarely will you hear me say that, but the NIT final, worth watching. Seton Hall versus Indiana State. So now we talked about college basketball, and we've got, again, some stuff coming at the end, and you know what that means. Probably negative, but we also have the professional game to discuss, the NBA. My Orlando Magic hanging in there, trying to stay out of the play-in tournament. They have got a rough couple of weeks here before the end of the season. 7 games left, including tonight as we record in New Orleans playing the Pelicans. Tough game for them to win. Right now they stand at 44-31, tied for the 4th seed in the East. I have a feeling they're going to slip down to the 5th or 6th spot before this is all said and done. Again, I've looked at the rest of their schedule. If they win 3 more games out of the final 7, I would be shocked. It's a tough schedule, including 2 games, I believe, against the Bucks at the end of the year. But still can't take away the fact that this has been a very good, very successful year for the Orlando Magic. In other NBA news, Joel Embiid is back for the Philadelphia 76ers. Again, we're taping on Wednesday, April the 3rd. He came back last night on the 2nd. And, of course, immediately the Sixers win. Right now, they're mired in the East in that play-in tournament slot, one of those 4 slots. The Chicago Bulls already locked into one of those 4 spots. If the Sixers get on a run, and I do believe the Magic have to deal with them one more time, if they get on a run, they could move up to that 6th spot, maybe even the 5th spot, and get out of the play-in tournament. But obviously, they're ecstatic to have Joel Embiid back. One of the teams that's not going to make the playoffs, and I know with the new setup, very few teams don't make the playoffs, at least with the play-in tournament. One of those teams in the East is, of course, the Charlotte Hornets. The former Magic head coach, Steve Clifford, now head coach of the Hornets, will be stepping down at the end of the season. We've heard a lot, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, hockey, in the D.C. area, a lot of maneuvering when it comes to where are these teams going to end up playing. Are they going to get new stadiums? Are they going to get new stadiums outside of the D.C. area? Are they going to end up in Virginia? Well, the Wizards and the Capitals are staying put. We still don't know what's going to happen with the Commanders and their new ownership group in the NFL, but the Wizards and the Capitals, you know how it works, the big business of sports, threatening to move. In this case, again, moving to a state close by, so you wouldn't have to change the name, wouldn't have to do anything like that, anything drastic, but they've made peace with the District of Columbia, so the Wizards and the Capitals stay in D.C. until at least 2050. So at least we have some stability there. I guess we have stability with the Minnesota Timberwolves. This weird, odd ownership saga where a couple years ago we talked about the fact that Alex Rodriguez, former baseball great with the Mariners, the Rangers, and the Yankees, and Mark Lowry had a deal in place to gradually, over a span of, I believe, 3 or 4 years, take over ownership of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And, of course, now the T-Wolves are playing great basketball. One of the top 3 or 4 seeds right now in the West. But the guy that they were going to take ownership from, the man that they were going to buy, majority ownership from. Glenn Taylor came up with some kind of a loophole. Said that somehow, some way, A-Rod and Mark Lowry did not meet the obligations over this 3 or 4 year span that they were supposed to in order to increase their ownership stake to the point where they would become the majority owners. So Glenn Taylor says, nah, no. See, you missed this little detail here. So it's not going to work out. So I'm going to retain majority ownership of the Timberwolves. And of course, A-Rod and Lowry are screaming, crying foul, saying that this is because over the last few years, the value of NBA franchises, and specifically the value of the Timberwolves, now that they're actually a good, viable, successful franchise, the value for the Timberwolves has gone up significantly. Let's put it that way. I won't say astronomically, but significantly increased. So Glenn Taylor's like, maybe I made a bad deal. Maybe I should back out on this, find a little loophole, find a little flaw in the contract, in the agreement, because now this team is worth a buttload more money than I thought it was going to be worth. So you can say it's negotiating in bad faith. If legally they found a way to deny A-Rod and Lowry majority ownership legally, and they found a loophole, and A-Rod and Lowry didn't dot their I's, cross their T's, then it's legit, but it seems really hinky. It seems like seller's remorse. You put a house on the market and you agree to sell it over time, and then the housing market explodes. All of a sudden, house values triple, quadruple, and you go, oh, no, you didn't put your initials on this page, so I'm backing out of the deal. And then you put it back on the market for a much, much higher price. So take it for what you will. They're all rich, entitled scumbags, so one rich, entitled scumbag screws over another rich, entitled scumbag. Then finally, on basketball in the NBA front, Rajon Rondo is retiring. Wow. Big, big whoop. I think this is more a commentary on where we are as a society, in that it makes news that Rajon Rondo is retiring. We have propped up all of these athletes and we've put them on pedestals. And you can call me a hypocrite because I'm doing a sports podcast, which is propping up all these athletes. But they're not getting money from me. They're not getting anything from me. This is always honest, free, clear opinion. But who cares if Rajon Rondo is retiring? Who really cares? A decent, above average player who moved around from team to team to team to team, mercenary, which of course a lot of these players are in all the sports. But again, do we really give two rip shits that Rajon Rondo retired? So what's he going to do now? Put out a podcast? Great, just what we need. Just what we need. Another former player putting out a podcast where they can barely put two sentences together and sound halfway illiterate. Of course, we're literate here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. And we're literate, we're intelligent, we're witty, we're suave, we're debonair. But there is one former NBA player who is not. Once again, I will give you a little foreshadowing. Stay tuned until we get to the Red Foreman Dumbasses of the Week. And we'll discuss that particular former Hall of Fame player. But that's it for basketball. We spent 30 minutes on basketball. I cannot remember the last time we ever spent 30 minutes on basketball. So let's move on to NASCAR. We're going to look ahead to the Cookout 400 at Martinsville and, of course, look back at the Toyota Owners 400 from Richmond. A couple headlines to discuss. First, Austin Dillon has had an absolutely miserable year. No surprise, considering the family ties and how he's basically an entitled little bitch and gets to run this car even though he stinks as a cup driver. But he whines and complains, and Richard Childress says, "Okay, Austin, let's give you a new crew chief." So now Justin Alexander will take over as the crew chief for the number 3 car. So now, is Austin Dillon going to finally figure it out? Or is he just going to run around in 25th place like he seems to do each and every week? We talked last week about North Wilkesboro, one of Dave's favorite tracks. And we talked about the discovery of this moonshine cave underneath the front stretch grandstands, and they had to remove seats. I'm kind of shocked. I'm kind of shocked that they were so cavalier about this. To me, it's kind of a piece of history. But I guess it's not the right kind of history. So North Wilkesboro has immediately started filling up this purported moonshine cavern with concrete so they can get the track ready, get those grandstands ready, get the seats installed to be ready for All-Star Weekend. But again, something about this bothers me, that it seems like a piece of possible history. They're just going to fill it up with concrete. Nobody got in there to do like an archaeological dig on it to see what kind of artifacts they could find from 100 years ago, possibly 80, 100 years ago, whatever it might have been. Just weird to me, how we pick and choose what parts of history we want to prop up, what parts we want to ignore, what parts we want to rewrite. And then, of course, another follow-up to a story we had here recently. We were talking about rumblings and rumors that NASCAR was looking to buy up 50% of the Long Beach Grand Prix as they continue to try to find a place to stage a second Cup Series race. Since Fontana is still undergoing major renovations, we still have the road course at Sonoma. There have been rumors, there have been talks about Dodger Stadium. Would be, to me, a logistical nightmare. But the Long Beach Grand Prix, that is off the table. As the current owner of half of the interest of the Long Beach Grand Prix, Gerald Forsyth, has come to an agreement with that other 50%, the estate of the former owner who passed away. Mr. Forsyth will buy that other 50%. He will own 100%. They're in Long Beach, so the Cup Series going to have to look somewhere else. And as Dave has always said, why not look at Laguna Seca? Great, great course, especially if you play Gran Turismo. I think that could be a really, really fun track. All right, so now let's look at Richmond last Sunday. Kyle Larson had the pole, dominated early. Now, some people I've read, some naysayers did not like this race, and I actually thought this race was fairly entertaining. Not the best ever, definitely not the best ever, but thought it was a hell of a lot more interesting than COTA, Circuit of the Americas, especially when you get that late race caution. Right before he was about ready to take the white flag for the final lap, Martin Truex Jr. had been dominating the second half of the race, was going to be cruising to an easy victory, but then Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson had an incident. Larson spun out, brings out the caution. Everybody has to pit. Tire wear, just too great. Even on 2 laps on a short track like Richmond, anybody who goes in for new tires is going to make up a ton of ground if you decide to stay out. So you're forced to basically go in. Truex does not come out in first. Denny Hamlin beats him out of the pits. And then the fun really starts, because there were accusations that Denny Hamlin jumped the restart. Truex said it in the post-race interview. NASCAR, looking back at it, sending out a statement where they really didn't. They kind of played both sides of the fence. They really didn't say he didn't jump the restart, but it was okay. We're okay with how it played out with the restart. So which is it? Did he jump the restart or did he not? It's pretty simple, one way or the other. It's not, well, maybe he did, but really too close to call. So Martin Truex frustrated with Denny Hamlin. And I like Martin Truex Jr. a lot, but he has, over the last few years, as he's been flirting with retirement, trying to figure out what the future holds for him, he's become a little bit of a whiny baby. He's become a little bit of a whiny bitch. He has. And this race will not do anything to dispel that image that he has built up over the last few years. He says Denny Hamlin jumped the restart. He says Denny Hamlin used me up right away on the first lap of overtime. Well, what was he supposed to do? Just say, okay, Martin, you've had a better car the whole race. I guess you deserve to win. Let me just go ahead and let you pass me and win the race. I mean, that was an idiot. That was more idiotic than him accusing Hamlin of jumping the restart. At least he can look back at the video on that, and he can look at this equivocating statement from NASCAR and kind of say, yeah, see, I wasn't completely wrong about that, was I? But for him to say, oh, he used me up on the first lap. What's he supposed to do? It's racing, Martin. Of course, I didn't mind Denny Hamlin winning because I picked him to win the race. So there is that as well. So maybe I'm not the unbiased observer in this case that I should be. But Truex bumps into Kyle Larson as well after the race is over on the cool down lap, bumping into Kyle Larson and then bumping into Denny Hamlin like a petulant little baby. What's he hitting Kyle Larson for? Because Kyle Larson was in an accident? that caused the caution that ended up costing Truex the race. And then poor Kyle Larson, he's got to sit there as he's getting interviewed and say, I don't know what I did to Martin Truex. I hope he's not mad at me. I'm not mad at him. We didn't really have that much in terms of contact or really hard racing against each other at the end. So again, a terrible, terrible, terrible look for Martin Truex Jr. at Richmond. So as we move on to race 8 of the NASCAR Cup season for 2024, the Cookout 400 takes place April the 7th at Martinsville. And so, guess who I'm taking along with my brother from another mother, the Conquistador Dave Height. Again, out of state, on business. Got his pick in early, and I'm with him again. Hopefully magic happens. Lightning strikes twice, 2 weeks in a row for he and I. Doesn't matter if he whined and bitched and pissed and moaned. Martin Truex Jr. is my pick, and it's Dave's pick as well for Martinsville this coming Sunday. 6 of our 8 expert panelists with their picks in. Sam, the elder statesman, taking Joey Logano. Bill, the Big Blue W, is taking Chase Elliott. He's starting to figure it out again. It's been a year. It's been a year, roughly, since that accident. Not car accident. What was it? Snowboarding? Snowmobiling, whatever it was, that stupid, stupid incident that cost him weeks and weeks, cost him a slot in the 2023 playoffs. And he has not looked the same since. He also, I believe, had shoulder issues. Bill is going back on the Chase Elliott bandwagon, at least for this week at Martinsville. Doug, the governor, taking Kyle Larson. Again, Kyle Larson dominated the first half of the race at Richmond. Martinsville, similar setup. Not a bad pick at all for Doug, who has struggled this year. Doug is above all. Out of the 8 panelists here at Sports Frenzy, he is the one who's had an absolutely miserable start with our NASCAR competition. And then finally, Aaron. He had Martin Truex last week. I'm not going to feel bad for him because I'm competing against him, but at the same time, not great luck for Aaron. A lot of points. And this week, he takes Ryan Blaney for Martinsville. All right, on to baseball. Who would have thought opening week in baseball would get shuffled all the way down to halfway through the podcast? Maybe that's a commentary on baseball and how little attention we pay to it anymore. Of course, not just me, not just Dave, but a lot of other people out there in the sports media talk about how baseball is just a regional sport anymore. You've got your one team, and that's all you care about. You will watch your one team. Other than that, you could care less about what happens to the other 29 teams in Major League Baseball. And I do firmly believe that. I do believe that's a big part of the problem with baseball. And you've got to, again, stop the Dodgers from deferring all this money with Shohei Ohtani. Haven't heard anything about that story this week, have you? We predicted it. I'm not going to say we fucking told you so yet, but they are pushing this, brushing this, sweeping this under the rug, under the carpet. They do not want to lose Shohei Ohtani in any kind of a gambling scandal. Now the Dodgers are off to a great start. As we tape this mid-late afternoon, on April the 3rd. Dodgers are 6-2, one of the best records out of the gate in baseball. Of course, they got a couple extra games under their belt from the South Korea 2-game series with the Padres. The Yankees, 5-1, again, as I'm taping. Great start for the Yankees. Juan Soto looks phenomenal. The Pirates are 5-0. Does not shock me. Does not shock me. I had a feeling about the Pirates, and it might not last. This might all blow up, but the Pirates are kind of following in the footsteps of what we've seen the Astros and the Cubs and the Orioles do over the last dozen or so years. Get the prospects, sift out the good ones from the bad, keep the one or two younger players who are heading into free agency, lock them up long term. Gorgeous ballpark. I could see the Pirates winning that division. We'll get to the Cubs in a minute. But I could see the Pirates winning that division. Now, the Brewers in that division, in the NL Central, also off to a great start. Just lost today for the first time. They are 4-1. And the Detroit Tigers having a tough time here getting games in as they're up in New York playing the Mets. Really having a rough time getting those games in, but they are 4-0 to start the season. On the flip side, the teams that stink, the teams that suck, two of them stand out. The New York Mets. Oh, if I got to deal with the Yankees being good again, then at least I can say the Mets suck. Flushed all that money down the toilet last year. And now they're paying for it. And now they're lifeless. I don't know why they fired Buck Showalter. Bring in a no-name coach to take over this team. This is what you get. Meet the new Mets, same as the old Mets. Then, of course, you have the Miami Marlins. And yes, we know the Miami Marlins every once in a while pop up and succeed. They've got a couple World Series trophies to show you. So they're not all bad, but boy, this is kind of what you normally expect from that team, given the fact they don't spend a lot of money and they don't get anybody to come see them at that ballpark, even though it's relatively new and it's very nice, bright and shiny. The Marlins, as of today, their game today already done, and they lost again. They are 0-7 to start the season. I mentioned the Cubs. Of course, right now looking up at the Pirates and the Brewers in the NL Central. Cubs got off to a rough start, especially first game, nationally televised game on opening night, official opening night. Sorry, Dodgers and Padres, and sorry, South Korea. Cubs get off to a rough start. The ace of the rotation, one of the top pitchers in the National League, Justin Steele, pulls a hamstring going to field a weak ground ball. He is on the IL. He will not be available, bare minimum, until the beginning of May. That hurts the Cubs immensely. And this is kind of why I was saying, why don't you go look at a Jordan Montgomery? Why don't you bring him in to shore up the rotation? Because Jamison Tyone, oh, my back, oh, my back. Terrible signing. He's going to go down as one of the worst Cub signings of the last decade. Just when you need him, He's not around either. So you've already lost 2/5 of your starting rotation one game into the season. Now, that being said, I still have faith in Craig Counsell. He's done his best to turn things around. They did lose the second game. They lost that game. They lost the second game as well to the defending world champion Texas Rangers down in Arlington. So I don't think there's a lot of shame there. They did win the third game of the series, and now they have won the first two games against the woeful, pitiful Colorado Rockies. Great to see Chris Bryant back at Wrigley. I don't think he's got a hit yet this year. I've always said when they were going to break up that World Series team, I didn't have a problem when you guys wanted to let go Chris Bryant and Javi Baez. You should have kept Rizzo, and you should have kept Schwarber. So again, Cubs right now 3-2. I don't think they're going to get the game in tonight. Weather here in the upper Midwest is pretty nasty. The last remnants of winter making its presence known. So I got a feeling this game is not going to happen tonight. Cubs 3-2 right now, though. We'll take it. We'll take it for now. They have got a brutally tough schedule here throughout the rest of April into May. I believe they don't even play anybody in the NL Central until mid-May. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Dave's White Sox. No, they're not good. I think they've only got one win so far on the young season. Desperate, so desperate that they decided to bring Mike Clevenger back. Trailer trash Mike Clevenger going to join the White Sox rotation again at some point. And that, again, should be enough to tell you how bad the White Sox are. And I'm not talking behind Dave's back because he knows. He knows, believe me. He knows. A couple other headlines, highlights from opening week. Astros pitcher Ronel Blanco. We've already got a no-hitter, kids. Thank God, a complete game no-hitter. Not one of those piecemeal no-hitters. The interesting thing about Ronel Blanco throwing this no-hitter the other night versus the Toronto Blue Jays, I believe right now, again, as I'm taping, I believe that's the only win of the season for the Astros right now, which is shocking. They were swept by the Yankees, 4-game series to open up the year, but at least they get one little highlight here in the first week. Ronel Blanco was only making his 8th career start, and he no-nos Toronto. And then the saga, the drama of the Oakland A's continues. Oakland has extended an agreement for team ownership perusal to extend their lease 5 more years to stay in the Oakland Coliseum until they can figure out what's going on with Las Vegas, because that situation is not fully resolved yet in terms of finalizing any kind of agreement to move into that stadium where they're going to tear down the legendary Tropicana Hotel on the Vegas Strip. Everything's a mess in Vegas when it comes to that. Everything's a mess in Oakland when it comes to trying to keep the A's. The A's are saying they're not real happy with this 5-year lease extension that has been offered. The city of Oakland basically wants to recoup about $100 million from the A's. So now Oakland, the A's, are talking with Sacramento, and Salt Lake City is still on the table. in terms of temporary stadium situations going forward for the next few years for the A's. All right, a little bit of football to discuss. Big trade news breaking today. Deet. Knew this was going to happen. You could just tell at the end of last year, Stephon Diggs did not have it anymore. Now, was that just he was tired of playing for the Bills? Has he crossed the threshold where he just doesn't have it skill-wise anymore? But the Bills trade Stephon Diggs too, and this is the part that shocks me. The Bills trade Stephon Diggs to the Houston Texans. One area where I was going to tell you the Houston Texans did not need help was going to be wide receiver. You got Nico Collins, you've got Tank Dell. You really want to bring Stephon Diggs into this mix? A lot of people are saying this is just going to be the whole win now attitude that the Texans have got. Of course, it involves picks. This trade with the Bills get a 2025 second round pick. Houston will get, in addition to Stephon Diggs, a 24 sixth round pick and a 2025 fifth round pick. But the Bills and Stephon Diggs, that was not going to end well. This needed to be done. I am just kind of shocked that the Texans end up being the team that lands Stephon Diggs. I don't like it. Honestly, I do not like it. Now, the Bills, I believe, are going to take on a lot of dead money because of this deal, but it had to be done. But I do not like this for the Texans. Any NFL team, it's a fragile ecosystem, and I don't think bringing Stephon Diggs in with those two great young receivers is going to make things better. I think it's going to make things worse. And then you've got, of course, the great young quarterback, C.J. Stroud. He's all of a sudden going to be thrust into the fire, having to balance a veteran ego with Steph Diggs. Still some transactions happening out there. Jadeveon Clowney signs a 2-year, $20 million deal with the Panthers as the Panthers keep trying to bring in some players to save them from once again being the worst team in the league. And the Eagles trade edge rusher Hassan Reddick to the Jets for a conditional 2026 third-round pick. I will be interested to see what happens with the Jets this year. You know I'm rooting against them. I root against pretty much any team from New York, but especially the Jets now because they have Aaron fucking Rodgers. And I think everything, unfortunately, last year we got our laugh. As Bears fans, like Dave and I, people around the league who hate Aaron Rodgers, we got our laughs in last year. 4 plays in, tears his Achilles. Now I'm concerned that this could be the year karma works back around in favor of the Jets. We just talked about the Bills trading Stephon Diggs. They had massive salary cap issues. So they could end up being a shell of who they've been the last 3 or 4 years. The Dolphins, do we really know who they are? The Patriots are a ways away from being relevant again. So things might be working in the Jets' favor in the AFC East. So before we move off of football, we talked about arguably the most hated team in women's basketball with LSU. So why wouldn't we talk about the most hated team in the NFL before we move on from professional football? Yes, that would be your reigning, defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. You know how I feel about the Chiefs. Yes, I have an unhealthy, borderline, sociopathic hatred for the Kansas City Chiefs because of what happened with Andy Reid and his son. But that's not the only reason. The evidence keeps mounting and mounting and growing for the fact that this team, as successful on the field as they have been, are a dumpster fire, a train wreck when it comes to society. We've talked about Brittany Mahomes. We've talked about Jackson Mahomes. Well, now we've got Rashee Rice, who looked like a great draft pick, who looked like he could be that guy that Patrick Mahomes was waiting on. He needed a number one receiver. Of course, a lot of it has to do with salary cap issues. Patrick Mahomes takes up a lot of their cap space, and he should. He is the best quarterback in the league. And he's one of the few things that is not wrong with the Chiefs. You can talk about Mr. Taylor Swift, that jackass, and now we have Rashee Rice. Again, ostensibly coming out of his first year with the Chiefs, the number one receiver, the favored target for Patrick Mahomes. Well, the dipshit proves to us once again that today's athlete thinks they're untouchable, invincible, entitled. They can do whatever they want and put anybody and everybody at risk. Damn the consequences. Rashee Rice reportedly left the scene of a crash in Dallas, Texas, racing his leased Lamborghini SUV. Multiple vehicles involved. Thankfully, nobody seriously hurt. But number one, it is a major crime to leave the scene of an accident, especially one that you most likely caused. And then attorneys for the lease office where he got his Lamborghini say that Rashee Rice was the only person authorized to drive that vehicle. And listen, we can talk about dumb criminals all we want, but I don't think they're that dumb. I think sometimes these criminals know what they're doing. By leaving the scene of the accident, Rashee Rice cast doubt on if he was driving. Is the penalty for him letting somebody else drive this leased Lamborghini going to be more or less severe than if he was driving it and caused this accident? Think about it. The scales of justice, and they never, ever fall in our favor. It's always the entitled, privileged asswipes in Hollywood or in professional sports that somehow find the loopholes, whether through dumb luck or through a high-priced attorney they have on retainer. Guaranteed, just like Shohei Ohtani in baseball, will get away somehow with this mess, this gambling mess, through his interpreter. Rashee Rice will somehow get out of this smelling like a rose because it's the Kansas City Chiefs, the figurehead right now for the National Football League. As much as I hate and despise them, he'll get away with it. And it's a terrible look for the NFL again. I know they're bulletproof. But look at what just happened a few years ago with the Raiders and their top draft pick in another miserable, awful, terrible car accident. In that case, much, much worse. I believe it was Henry Ruggs. Destroyed his career, went to jail, didn't go to jail for nearly as much time as I would have liked. But at least there was still some kind of a penalty there. At least he did pay a heavy, heavy price for what he did. But because nobody was seriously hurt here, Rashee Rice will skate. I fucking told you so. Just remember it. He'll be on the field week 1 with the Kansas City Chiefs like nothing ever happened. Now the Chiefs signed Carson Wentz to back up Patrick Mahomes. Smart signing. And then they also bring back Clyde Edwards-Helaire to back up Isaiah Pacheco. Again, on the field, the Chiefs do everything right. It's off the field where I have monumental issues with them. But they got a little slap on the wrist by Jackson County voters in Missouri. Now, unfortunately, this also affects the Kansas City Royals, but good for the voters in Jackson County. They said enough is enough. They said no. 58% of voters said no. We do not want to extend or add on to a sales tax plan that will build a new stadium or help to build a new stadium in downtown Kansas City for the Royals and pay for renovations for Arrowhead Stadium. Yes, the owners of both franchises said they were going to chip in significant amounts of money. But especially with the case involving the Chiefs. You know these owners are making money hand over fist. They don't need taxpayer money. Why do they want it? Because they can ask for it, and in a lot of cases, they get it. And you wonder why people are depressed, anxious, stressed out all the time. You can't even turn to sports without dealing with money-grubbing bastards who lie to your face, stab you in the back, try to take every little ounce of money that you and I work hard for, jack up the tax rate on the common man, the middle class, the lower class. Nobody has any vision anymore. There is no leader out there who has any vision, who can't look into the future and figure out how to make the world a better place without penalizing the people who live on this earth. It's always about penalize, tax, denigrate, insult, drive people into the ground until they give up. Do not give up. Good for Jackson County voters, once again, telling the Royals and the Chiefs, no, you're rich, you pay for stadiums. You pay for renovations. All right, let's go to positive stuff for a minute here. Let's get off the negative, go positive. I have 2 Clint Eastwood badasses of the week for you. We talked about how the Pittsburgh Pirates are off to a great start. Finally, that team maybe possibly emerging from the muck, the mess that they gave themselves, that their ownership put themselves in for taking all the revenue sharing money for all those years and not spending, not putting a quality team on the field. Maybe that has finally come to an end. And another positive step forward for the Pirates is their young pitcher, Paul Skenes. I hope I'm saying that name right. Young phenom pitcher, hopes to make it up to the major leagues at some point this year. Has pledged $100 per strikeout to the Gary Sinise Foundation. If you know anything about Gary Sinise, most notably we know him from being Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump and, of course, on CSI New York. But Gary Sinise has a passion for protecting and helping our veterans and our soldiers. And it's a great, great positive move by Paul Skenes to, even if this gesture ends up only putting $5,000 or $10,000 into the coffers for the Gary Sinise Foundation, it's still a worthwhile and a positive move forward. So Paul Skenes is one of our 2 Clint Eastwood badasses of the week. Now, the UFL debuted this past weekend, and I am one of the few people that normally would get suckered into spring football, but I've had it. I can't do it anymore. I did not watch one single second of the UFL this past weekend. Sorry. Just didn't do it for me. You had basketball on all weekend. You had racing. But I guess there was one very, very positive moment in the UFL. So my second Clint Eastwood badass of the week is Michigan kicker Jake Bates. Jake Bates kicked a game-winning 64-yard field goal. Now that would be impressive even in the NFL. But what we have to keep in mind here is that Mr. Bates had not kicked a field goal up until this game since 2017 when he was in high school. And that is the part that makes Jake Bates my second Clint Eastwood badass of the week. All right, Dave's not here, obviously, but real quick mention for his Chicago Blackhawks, 22, 48, and 5, 49 points. Looks like they're going to be able to stay out of the absolute bottom cellar. The San Jose Sharks look like they've got that pretty much locked up. So again, the Blackhawks have got 49 points. So second worst in the NHL, but with Connor Bedard, they have a bright future ahead. We've got the PGA Tour, we've got Live Golf fighting as always. Now they both admit, the players both admit on either side, they have got to come together and figure something out because it's hurting golf as a whole. But at least on the PGA side, you do have Scottie Scheffler. Scottie Scheffler could be the most dominant golfer we have seen in a long time. Unfortunately, this past weekend at the Houston Open, he could not win his 3rd straight PGA Tour start. Tied for 2nd at 11 under. Still not bad. Win, tie for 2nd. I think most of us would take that. What do you think? Stefan Jaeger won the Houston Open at 12 under. Arguably more impressive during the Houston Open, Scottie Scheffler's PGA Tour record for consecutive rounds under par. That streak was snapped Friday at the Houston Open. Shot an even par round 2 on Friday, but 28 rounds up until that point, consecutive rounds under par. Again, a PGA Tour record. So, be very, very hard, whether you're talking live golf, whether you're talking the PGA Tour, to find anybody better right now than Scottie Scheffler. All right, let's move on to moments of silence here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. Two-time Pro Bowl cornerback Vontae Davis played for the Dolphins, played for the Colts down in Indianapolis. Still have not seen a definitive cause of death, which in this case is a point of curiosity because Vontae Davis was only 35 years old. Nobody suspects foul play, though, so thank goodness for that. And then Larry Lucchino, most notably the Red Sox CEO and president, the man that helped to bring them not one, not two, but 3 titles after a long, legendary dry spell. So, of course, Boston fans are in mourning as Larry Lucchino has passed away. So thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of Vontae Davis and Larry Lucchino. But, we have to pivot. It's what we do here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. But before we get to America's favorite segment, not game show this week because Dave's not here, America's favorite segment where we call out all the idiots in the sports world, the Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. Do have to give you an update on where you can find Sports Frenzy 2.0. You found us somewhere. We've got some changes coming. Again, shouldn't be anything that really affects what you hear. But week after week after week, Spotify, our host platform, keeps throwing curveballs at us. I am not happy with them right now. But we lost Radio Public here this past week. They are no longer a platform where you can hear us. They don't exist anymore. I have heard that Google Podcasts have possibly maybe shut down. So, with confidence, I can tell you that you can find Sports Frenzy 2.0 on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Castbox, Amazon Music, and Audible. Don't forget to check out the Facebook page where each and every week you can find our panels, baseball picks, our panels, NASCAR picks. And then, of course, when we get to football season, each and every weekend you will find our football picks for the college ranks as well as the NFL. So let's move on, do our pivot. As Ross Geller said on Friends, pivot. 5 dumbasses for you this week, unfortunately, almost exclusively in the world of basketball. Seems to be a recurring theme, a trend. Let's start off with the small ones and move up to the bigger ones. As if college basketball, college sports weren't fractured enough, Fox has now decided, let's get together with AEG, and start up another new men's basketball postseason tournament. We just talked about how the NIT has probably their best championship matchup in a long, long time. So let's just get another tournament in there to tear apart and rip down the NIT or any other tournament out there. Because God knows we've already got schools that refuse to play in the NIT. St. John's, Rick Pitino, asshole. So yeah, let's throw another tournament out there. And of course, this one has got to be driven by Fox and their TV contracts. Why? Because this new tournament now will be played in Las Vegas starting in 2025. Again, Fox Sports and AEG are behind this. This will be a 16-team tournament with 6 automatic bids. Who's getting those 6 automatic bids, Kev? Well, those bids would go 2 apiece to the 3 conferences that Fox has TV contracts with: the Big 12, the Big East, and the Big 10. Dumb, stupid idea by Fox. Dumb, stupid idea. And if everybody else started to think this way, again, we would fracture college sports even more than we already have. Let's move on to baseball real quick, and then we'll come back, believe me, to wrap things up with basketball. Technology's great, isn't it, kids? ESPN does these stupid in-game interviews with players who are actually on the field playing the game. So their first Sunday night game of the year featured the St. Louis Cardinals and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Kiki Hernandez has got the little earpiece talking to the guys in the booth. Now, I did not realize, I will admit ignorance on this part, I did not realize that anybody outside the pitcher and the catcher had access to this new PitchCom device that's been put in here within the last year or two in Major League Baseball to avoid, of course, all the finger signals in the catcher's crotch. So now they've got this massive little keyboard on their wrist where they type in the pitch suggestion from the catcher to the pitcher. Did not realize that players in the infield or in the field of play at all had access to this. Well, it turns out they do. And of course, Kiki Hernandez playing for the Dodgers, talking to the guys in the booth for ESPN, could not hear the PitchCom. So he decided to turn that up while talking to ESPN. So all of the pitches that were being called between the Dodgers pitcher and catcher were being broadcast over the air on ESPN. God, honestly, you can call me get off my lawn guy, bitter old man guy. That's fine. Sometimes technology sucks ass and it does not work the way it's supposed to, and we rely on it too much. Turn your phones off once in a while. Connect with your kids, with your family, with your loved ones. We go too far with this stuff, and it just gets us into trouble, and we go further and further down the rabbit hole, and it never does us any good. All right, so now for our last 3 dumbasses of the week here on April the 3rd, 2024, dropping April the 4th. Exclusively basketball. Kind of told you that at the beginning, alluded to it, a little bit of foreshadowing. But before we get there to put a bow on this episode here, got to remember to check out the weekend edition this coming Saturday morning. Your politically incorrect hangover cure every Saturday morning, the weekend edition, where Dave and I discuss pop culture, movies, music, TV, and streaming. Just me this coming Saturday morning, but you will not want to miss it. Couple movie reviews for you, of course. A plethora of Hollywood dumbasses. New music from Pearl Jam and Scott Stapp of Creed. We'll continue to talk about our favorite shows that are on right now. Resident Alien, Tokyo Vice, The Gentleman, a new one, Parish on AMC, starring the great Giancarlo Esposito. I know Dave and his youngest son, big fans. They are huge into Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. So do not forget to check out your Saturday morning hangover cure, the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0. All right, our final three dumbasses, again, all come from the world of basketball. Let's start off with the women's NCAA tournament. Specifically, a game involving North Carolina State and Texas, played in Portland, where after playing a number of games on the court, somebody finally realized the three-point line on one side of the court was inaccurate compared to the other side. The measurements were wrong. Now, they got lucky that the coaches decided, instead of an hour delay, how long it would have taken to remeasure the one side and fix it. They decided, let's just play it out. In the end, there won't be a disadvantage unless it goes to overtime. Then they would have had a clusterfuck on their hands. But because you switch sides, each team was going to play with the shorter three-point line for an equal amount of time. But the fact, again, in this day and age, that something like this happens, I have said it over and over and over again for years and years and years. We started dumbing down our society in the 90s. The requirements on standardized tests changed. And we had people saying, oh, it's racist. We shouldn't have standardized testing. We should just let everybody pass. Let everybody go to college for free and screw what everybody before them had to do in terms of the hard work and the studying and the testing and the bills and the loans that they had to pay. Screw them. Let's change the rules and just make it about us, and nobody but us. And this is what you get. You get dumbasses who can't measure and set up a basketball court for a very important, very prestigious, top-level basketball tournament. Shame on the NCAA. Shame on the idiots who screwed this up. You are all dumbasses. Now, I alluded to the fact that there was a former NBA player, a Hall of Famer, who made a complete and total fool of himself. And it's amazing to me, and this is, of course, an explicit podcast. This is, of course, a politically incorrect podcast. And I have told you guys over and over again, over the weeks, over the months, over the years, that we've been doing Sports Frenzy, and Dave agrees with me. You do not apologize. You fight for what's right. And you call out bigots, racists, regardless of skin color, sexual orientation, white, black, gay, straight, I don't care. If you're an idiot, we're calling you out. So somehow, Boston Celtics legend Paul Pierce, and again, it always seems to be about Caitlin Clark. It always seems to be about Caitlin Clark here recently, and how people keep trying to denigrate her and drag her down because she's white. And the hatred among the African American basketball community for her is disgusting, pathetic, and dangerous. And now Paul Pierce is the latest to chime in. We talked about Cheryl Swoops. Now Paul Pierce joking around on FS1 with Skip Bayless, another complete and total a-hole, no talent asshole. Paul Pierce, and I'm going to paraphrase it a bit here, but I'm not going to say anything that really doesn't drive right down to the core and the heart of what he said. Oh, I've got newfound respect for Caitlin Clark. That white girl from Iowa did it to a bunch of black girls. She didn't do it to a bunch of other small white girls. She did it to a bunch of black girls from LSU. Those aren't my words. Again, I paraphrase, but not much, from what Paul Pierce said. If this is the kind of rhetoric that we're going to allow, God help our country. Paul Pierce should be fired from FS1 immediately. Oh, I'm just joking around, just kidding around. I just said this white girl did it to a bunch of black girls. Ha ha. It's racist, nasty, despicable rhetoric. It's insipid. It's ignorant. And somehow Paul Pierce, over the years and the decades, has been able, again, to be one of these athletes that people disregard the negative stuff that he's done in his life. Like Allen Iverson, another one. Recently, Gilbert Arenas. He's an absolute racist piece of crap. And again, I don't buy into the black people can't be racist. Everybody can be a racist. I would prefer none of us were racists. I would prefer we all held hands and sang Kumbaya, and I am not being facetious. I really do. I really, really wish that was the way the world is. Go back to the hippy dippy Coke commercials from the mid 70s. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I am not joking. I would love it if the world was like that. I hate bringing up stuff like this, but it's out there, it exists, and the media ignores it and gives it a pass because it's a black person spouting racism against a white woman. And it needs to be pointed out, it needs to be called out, and he needs to be fired. Because he obviously doesn't have a filter when it comes to hatred. So let's wrap things up, not quite as negative as that. This isn't racism, but there's something despicable here. There's something not right here. And anybody who knows me knows locally where we tape here at the Sports Frenzy Studios, Notre Dame is close by. And I'm not a huge Notre Dame fan. But I will say this. The women's program, basketball program at Notre Dame, luckily did not have any major bumps in the road as Muffet McGraw retired as head coach. The new regime came in. They have done a really good job They got to the Sweet 16 this year, thanks in great part, to one Hannah Hidalgo. But the referees in Notre Dame's Sweet 16 game decided to stop play, force Hannah Hidalgo out of the game, and tell the medical staff, the people, the trainers on the sidelines, take out her nose ring, otherwise she can't play. Now, let's put this in perspective. If this had been the rule and it had been enforced since game 1 of the regular season, I wouldn't have an issue with this. But my understanding is that Hannah Hidalgo got to play with this nose ring. I can't believe we're discussing a nose ring, but if you're going to enforce the rules, enforce them from the beginning. Do not let Hannah Hidalgo play the entire season and play up until the Sweet 16 in the NCAA women's basketball tournament, and then finally decide in the game, now we've decided you got to take it out and take it out now. And it was a bloody, nasty mess because the trainers didn't know what to do, didn't know how to get it out quickly and easily. This is another black eye for the NCAA. And these refs should be ashamed of themselves. They might have thought, well, we're just enforcing the rules and we can't really do what past crews did. Bullshit. Bullshit. You would have known, and I'm sorry, it would have taken a really, really ignorant group of referees not to know that this girl wore this nose ring throughout the entire year. And nobody ever called her out on it. You couldn't have said something before the game and said, listen, we're aware that she wears a nose ring. We've seen it on video. The NCAA now says it's a point of emphasis. This is another part of this I love. A point of emphasis. They decide right now in the Sweet 16, we're going to make this a point of emphasis. Again, give me a fucking break. You victimized this poor girl. You victimized this poor girl. To put this kind of pressure on her in the middle of a game when there were no problems throughout the entire season and at the early stages of the tournament, and you decide to put her through this in the middle of a Sweet 16 game, shame on you. There have got to be a load of dumbasses involved here, but shame on you to put Hannah Hidalgo through this, arguably, possibly costing Notre Dame a chance to move on to the Elite Eight. So there you go. As always, at the end, when you bring in the Red Foreman Dumbasses of the Week, we get fired up here. The profanity flies. And yes, I remember when I was a kid, I had to go through all the typical chastising from my parents. Finish your dinner. They're starving kids overseas. Don't curse. Don't swear. It shows a lack of intelligence. Don't say the word hate. You never want to use the word hate. All very, very fantastic sentiments that it would be great in a perfect world if we could all live by. But in this day and age, I can't get my point across unless I fucking curse and unless I say I hate these people for their ignorance, their racism, and their stupidity. So there you go. So another sunny, happy edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0 comes to a close. Miss my brother from another mother, Dave. He'll be back next Wednesday. Do not again forget to check out the weekend edition. Again, Tokyo Vice getting ready to wrap up. Pearl Jam, new song. Scott Stapp, new album. We'll revisit yet again because I'm obsessed with it. Old school literary detectives, not only in books, but on the silver screen and on TV. So plenty of good stuff coming this weekend. Your Saturday morning hangover cure. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Check you out in 7 days if you don't listen on Saturday morning. Peace out, kids.